Hey there guys, I hope you're doing really well. I recently did a video about my 800-day streak on Duolingo and what I think Duolingo can do for you if used properly. But today I wanted to talk to you about a more advanced method, one that I've discovered very recently and I think is excellent. It's not actually new, I'm certainly not the first person to think of it, but it's one of those things that within 2 hours of using this thing, I was hooked and I was like, where has this been? What have I been doing not using this? It's one of those things that I knew you could potentially do, but until a friend of mine actually said you should get onto this, it's something I was just going to do one of these days. So what I'm talking about is ebooks in your target language, and more specifically, features that certain ebook apps can give you and how that helps you for your language learning. Now, lots of ebook platforms probably gives you these same features, okay? I'm not here to tell you that my one, the one I'm going to suggest, is the best one or anything like that. I'm certainly not here to advertise it. The one I have found for my purposes is perfect, and I'm going to tell you why. For the last week or so, I've been using a service called BookMate. Now, if you're familiar with e-reading platforms, you'll probably know about BookMate. I understand that a lot of people criticize them for their English language selection. As I said, don't care about that. I'm only looking at it from a target language acquisition perspective. I'm perfectly happy with my local library for English books. I'm just talking about BookMate as a language learning app, even though it technically is not. That's what I'm using it for. BookMate is basically an online library which you pay a monthly fee for, and in exchange you get access to whatever they have. That includes books and audiobooks. Audiobooks are not extra. It's not the first of its kind, there are others, but I'm looking at this purely from a target language improvement perspective. The fee is $10 US a month, or $12 AU a month, which is actually a bit cheaper than the US one. And for content subscription services like Kindle Unlimited, Scribd, etc., that's not that cheap. But compared to anything language learning related, that's a pittance. For example, by not having 2 lessons on italki that I would have had, I have now paid for 3 months of one of these services. Here are 5 things that I think your ebook subscription service should have if you're going to use them for language learning. Number 1. Any passage can be highlighted and translated using Google Translate or another online translator. On BookMate, there's a shortcut. You hit T and it starts processing the translation. It normally takes a second or 2 depending on the length of the passage. On the mobile app, curiously, it uses a more professional dictionary that seems to be of Russian origin, and sometimes that's more useful, although you don't seem to be able to get that on the desktop for some reason. That doesn't really matter though. The point is that without going into a separate website and everything, I can get a rough idea of what words mean that I've never seen before. I don't actually want good translations, I want the clunky translations, because when you have to decode them, it tends to help you remember the original language better. Secondly, I can make my own notes about certain words or passages, and I can highlight them in different colours. So I could have, for example, orange to indicate pronunciation, blue to indicate a certain grammatical feature that I'm learning, or whatever. It's simple, it works, it doesn't get in the way. I imagine that this is common to e-readers and ebook apps, but for me it's a prerequisite if you're using it for language learning. I actually love opening the book I've been working on and seeing my highlighted passages in different colours. It makes me feel like a pro. 3 is fairly similar to number 2, but just by hitting Q, you can actually quote certain words or passages. Now, I didn't even realise I was doing this. I did about 103 quotes or something without knowing that by hitting Q, I was actually saving quotes. Friends, if you're connected on the app with friends, can also see your quotes, but that's not what's important. What's important for me is that you can select certain things, hit Q, and it saves them, and then without the book being open, you can actually look at your quotes and say you've been selecting all the things that use modal verbs or something like that. You can then see all of those things at the same time from different books without those books being open. It's a very helpful feature for language learning. The 4th thing seems small, but it actually makes a bigger difference than you'd think. You can set the site language to any language that it has books in, and then all the text will appear in that language. This is different to, say, 24 Symbols. 24 Symbols is a competing service. It looks very nice, it is actually a bit cheaper, but when I set the language to French, I was still seeing text in English. When there are as many settings on your profile as there are for an app like this, it makes a difference to your mentality to see all those things in your target language. There are not thousands of settings, but it does all add up to a couple of hundred words at least. This includes genres. if you want to search for certain genres, the names of the genres are in your target language. It's a small detail, but it makes a big difference. This brings me to feature number 5, which is that when your library is set to say German, then when you free browse all books, it will only show you books in German. If you search for titles in other languages, then it'll show you those titles, sure. But if you're just openly browsing in genres or in all books, it will only show you titles in the language you have your library set in. Why is this a good thing? Well, if you're anything like me, you get distracted by everything. It doesn't even matter if the title is in a language you don't speak. So by showing you titles only in your target language, there's less avenue for distraction. Less avenue for distraction means less distraction, less procrastination. It's only a good thing. Okay, so I think I said that there was a particular feature that sold me on BookMate, and that is content in my target language. That is what it's going to come down to for you. Which ebook app has the most content, or the content that you most want to read in your target language? It has to be said that the selection of languages on BookMate is really weird, but that makes it all the better if you're learning one of those languages. Azerbaijani, Kazakh, Ukrainian, Serbian, Danish, Swedish, Turkish, Indonesian, Dutch, German, Spanish, Russian, and English. With the exception of those last 5, native material, that is stuff written in the languages to begin with, is pretty hard to come by, particularly in Australia. I actually went so far as to ask the staff in IKEA Sydney if I could buy the Swedish books that are on the shelves in like the kids' bedrooms and stuff. They're Swedish books for decoration. I asked how much if I want to buy one of these. You can't buy them, they're not for sale. Since then, I've learned a little bit more about where you can buy Swedish books, but I've also learned that they're expensive, generally very expensive. So when I found that BookMate had quite a lot of Swedish books, and it had the first 4 of 5 titles that I searched for, I was like, "Utekesh." One more thing that's a bit of a bonus, and something that seems most of the other sites don't have, you can upload your own books if they're in EPUB or FB2 format. So I have a few Swedish ebooks that I've bought and paid for, and it's just nice that I can upload them so as to have those functions that I've mentioned. BookMate also counts the amount of time that I've had book files open in total, so it's currently telling me that I've been reading for 3 hours or so. That basically amounts to counting up all the time that I've spent working towards my literary goals in Swedish. It's a nice little feature, not a big deal, but I like that it has it. Guys, I hope you found this informative and helpful. As I said, I'm not an expert when it comes to ebooks, so let me know your tips and what platforms and stuff you use. One day I would hope to use this technique for French, but not with BookMate because BookMate doesn't have French. It's actually a little bit weird. So definitely let me know if you're doing this already. What platforms and apps are you using? I'm very interested to know for sure. I like to talk about all things foreign language related, even if it's reviewing TV series and books. So please subscribe and comment. It helps me to feel encouraged to do more of these, and it really does work. If it's not up already, my review of Trapped, the Icelandic series, should be up very, very soon. It's very underrated, that series. I recommend you watch my review. Anyway, wherever you are and whatever language you're learning, I really hope you enjoyed this and found it helpful, and I'll see you next time. And I'm certainly not the first person to think about it, which I can do that whenever I want at the library. This is terrible. Just stop talking. You take my money.